Hey, this is the Eat to Live podcast. I'm with my dad, Dr. Fuhrman.
Hi, everybody, and I'm with my daughter, Jenna. Gonna have some fun.
Woo! Today we're going to talk about fish. Is fish friend or foe? Is it good for you or bad for you? I feel like on the internet, there's so many different sides to this conversation, so I'm really excited to dive in and find out the answer.
It'll be fun.
Let's do it.
And we want to, of course, give people as much information as possible so they can make the decision for themselves.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I think what I love and hate is you always give me the good and the bad on these topics. Here are the pros about eating that. Here are the cons. Mm-hmm. And some of the time it's not such a black and white answer, yes or no.
Right. Well, there's a lot of, when people have a predetermined bias, they want to present just one side of the story, and you can't trust what they're saying. So I'm trying to spend as much time as I can looking at both sides of every issue and going through all the data, because it's my passion to really do what's best and live the healthiest life possible and share that with my audience as to what I've determined is my recommendations, but also how I came to that recommendation, not by looking to collect information that boosters one side of the story. I have no predetermined side of the story.
Right. You're saying you're like a completely non-biased empirical scientist.
A blank sheet. A blank
if you
sheet.
Will.
But then it takes more effort. Like if you're looking at some relationship between a food and disease, it takes a big effort to review 1,000 studies, not just pick 2 or 3 that you think support your viewpoint. You got to say, well, was there any other studies on this? I got to look at all 1,000 and see where the evidence points is in a holistic fashion.
And you always taught me to look at the long-term study. So not just like how they behaved, in a couple months or a couple of years, but looking over the course of 50 years, 100 years, because we're trying to push that envelope on longevity. So I want to be healthy into my 90s.
That's what makes, I think, my advice somewhat different. What you just said is because I'm seeing if we're going to live longer, if we're going to eat a dietary portfolio that's going to enable us not to have a low risk of cancer and almost a zero risk of heart attacks and strokes, and we're going to live longer, then what are our other risks that might prevail in our life if we're living past the age of 90 in those last 10 years of life, which are not, I'm saying the average lifespan of a healthy person should be between 97 and 107 years old. And what's going to befall us to make those last 10 years of life not enjoyable? And so we have to be proactive to live a healthy life so we can not just live longer, but have our full mental and physical faculties in that later part of our life. And that's where other people don't have the same viewpoints as I do, because they're not looking to maximize your health in the last decade of life. They're just doing what's better than average.
Right. And I love what you say about being better than the blue zones. The blue zones are such a good example of generations and populations that have really put health and nutrition at top of mind, and they've lived longer and made right choices. But what you say is now we have science on our side, so we could even do better than the blue zones. Exactly.
We can do much better than the blue zones. So the blue zones are not a gold standard just because they're better than the lousy standard American diet.
Mm-hmm. And I think someone my age, around 30 years old, you're not always thinking about your future health. Like you're kind of like wanting to deal with the now. And if I feel good now, it's good enough. But I think what makes people in the conversation around nutrition, and a lot of my friends are getting so into it, is we are starting to think like, hey, I want to be this way forever. Like I don't want my quality of life to decline.
Yeah, which in most people's quality of life does decline when they pass 60, 70, certainly, and then they get to be 80, their quality of life declines. I know, but that's the tough question, is that most people, they're young and healthy, and they used to think they could smoke, they could be on a carnivore diet because they feel great right now, they could take drugs, they can drink alcohol because they feel okay, and they don't understand that these negative impacts on their health are cumulative all through their life. They can't just stop drinking at the age of 70 because their whole lifetime of alcohol drinking affects their brain function in later life. Your whole intake of salt throughout your whole life has a negative impact on your cardiovascular system, which cumulative affects you in your later years. You can't just cut out the salt when you're 75 years old and think you're going to be okay, because you're still going to have damage and be at increased risk from the high intake of salt you had in your younger years. So people also don't see that cause and effect can be very separated in the timeline of your life. The cause of some disease you get could be relinked back to what you did in your infancy, or what your mother did when she was pregnant, or before pregnancy even. And cancer can be caused by what you did not 10 years before, but 30 years back.
You said there's a big lag when it comes to nutrition.
A big lag with regard to almost every disease, and that's where we're talking about the lag between a symptom like memory loss and dementia. We can't start the elderly taking, let's say, DHA to make sure their omega-3 index is adequate to protect dementia, because by then it's too late. It's their lifetime, because it takes so many years for the brain to regulate itself and stabilize itself from your diet. And your brain eventually takes the form that your diet took, and your body takes the form. We control our health, but it formulates our health over many years, and we can't just suddenly expect it to change rapidly when we start doing the right thing after we did the wrong thing for 30 years, or 40 years, or 50 years. You know what I mean?
You always said it's all about your pack years, which really resonated with me, because it's like, you always said smoking, it's not about like how many cigarettes you do a day. I'm trying to explain the pack years.
It means how
You're
many
better
packs,
explaining it.
How many packs a day you smoke, for how many years you smoke those packs. So if you had 3 packs a day of smoking for 30 years at 3 packs a day, that's 90 pack years. And that represents a certain degree of risk, compared to a person smoking 1 pack a day for 10 years is 10 pack years.
Right.
So
Just
which is more
different.
risky? It's the same thing with salt years, and the same thing with maintaining nutritional deficiencies or nutritional stresses on the body. Maintaining those same stresses for the number of years that cumulatively affect your life in your later years.
Yeah, I always saw it as like this scale of like, okay, if there's like a little bit of oil versus someone who puts in 2 tablespoons of oil in every single thing you eat versus the little oil at a restaurant, it just adds up over their whole lifetime, probably as like a whole swimming pool of oil versus like 1 cup, because over a whole lifetime, those little changes matter.
Yes.
Which is crazy. So you mentioned omega-3 and omega-6. So I thought before we really dive into fish, if it's friend or foe, we'd talk about what exactly is the difference between omega-3 and omega-6, and why do people always talk about them?
Well, they're both essential fats, by the way.
Essential fatty acids.
Yes, essential fatty acids.
Okay.
We need fat. We need fat for our health, our immune system, our brain function. So people think a low-fat diet is better. And I'm saying, no, we need adequate fat if we're going to have an excellent survival into our later years. And we need omega-6 fat too. We need a certain amount. So the things that are high in omega-6 fat are oils, and animal fats are high in omega-6, except for fish has more omega-3 fats and less omega-6. And the omega-3 fats are more anti-inflammatory. But it's the excess omega-6 fats that are pro-inflammatory. A normal amount is not pro-inflammatory.
Right. A normal amount's good.
A normal amount's good.
When people eat a lot of meat or a lot of oils, they're probably getting too much.
They're getting too much protein, they're getting too much fat in their diet, and too much omega-6 fat and too much saturated fat. And most of the fat content of the American diet are animal fats and oils, which are both, you could say, negative sources of fat, because both animal fats and oils contribute to chronic disease. Mm-hmm. On a nutritarian diet, our fat intake comes from nuts and seeds, whole foods, and we're trying to balance the omega-6, omega-3 from those whole foods. So, because greens are rich in, green vegetables have fat in them too.
Really?
Yeah.
I feel like no one talks about that.
And they're rich in omega-3 fatty acids, especially leafy greens have a lot of omega-3 fatty acids.
Oh, I didn't know that.
The ALA in green and walnuts, flax seeds, chia seeds, and hemp seeds, that ALA is the short-chain omega-3 fat, which is also good for our health, irrespective of the amount of long-chain omega-3 we're exposed to. That's the DHA and EPA. So I'm saying if you had no exposure to ALA, the short-chain fats, through green vegetables and flax seeds and walnuts, and you just took fish oil and had your DHA, EPA be high, it still wouldn't be ideal. Because we want to raise the short-chain fats, the ALA, and the long-chain fats to adequate levels.
Okay.
And now some people think, some vegans and who are really excited about veganism and want to promote a plant-based diet, they think that it's okay that you can get all the fats you need from the ALA and that you'll convert enough to make EPA and DHA. That's a theory,
Like saying short chain fatty acids convert to long chain fatty acids.
Convert to long chain fatty acid adequately.
Okay.
Adequately. And the truth is they do convert adequately for most of your life, but not adequately to reduce the risks of chronic diseases that develop over a lifetime when people are going to live longer. In generally speaking, people say, vegans don't need to take omega, like DHA, preformed DHA and EPA, because vegans and vegetarians have less dementia than people who are standard American diet, meat eaters. Well, that's an irrelevant argument. It doesn't even make sense, because most dementia isn't caused by DHA deficiency or omega-3 deficiency. Most dementia is caused by atherosclerosis, by eating meat and bacon and cheeseburgers and the lack of phytochemicals and antioxidants in the diet that the brain needs to maintain brain size and brain function. So of course there's going to be
There's also a small population of vegans compared to the rest of the world.
Right. There's a very small population of vegans.
So they're not going to be the leading cause of dementia.
Vegans is less than 1%, so it's not going to be a major cause of dementia. And even among vegans, there's going to be still much less dementia in this small amount of vegans than there would be in meat eaters, because your meat-based diet or a standard diet is more dangerous to the brain than a vegan diet would be when you're not going to eat, especially people who are not eating junk food. Mm-hmm. However, in the vegan population, where you have less dementia because they're not eating cheeseburgers and bacon, and they have exposure to phytochemicals, in that population, you're going to see less dementia, but the people who get dementia are those who are going to be living the longest. They have to be healthy eater to live long enough, because most of the vegans are going to die before they get dementia if they're not eating healthy enough.
Yeah, I know. I also hate that. I feel like in the plant-based community, I hate that there's like a type of diet that's junk food vegans, where they eat just like pasta and like soy protein isolate, and they're really not thinking about their G-bombs and these like healthy fresh vegetables. Right. And it's not the same diet. And it's just different.
It's not the same diet, and it's not my niche of what I do or recommend. I'm trying to maximally extend lifespan. It's not the diet for everybody, because a lot of people just want to enjoy their life more, so they think, and live shorter lifespan. And if you want to do that, that's fine. You could do that.
Like, I'd rather just eat my meat and potatoes. Eat
whatever
I
want and die early. Okay, it's I don't want to take away your right to do what you want, but I like to do what I want. I want to live healthfully and live longer and enjoy my life for a longer period of time, and have the things I enjoy I can do in my later years. So I'm cultivating my recommendations for those plant-based eaters, vegans and near vegans, who are going to live a long time because they've taken good care of their health. And now what happens to you in your later years is you get weaker. Your bones could shrink, your muscles could shrink. It's called osteopenia, and sarcopenia can happen. Sarcopenia is loss of muscle tissue. And when you shrink, and your brain shrinks too.
Is this all from not enough long-chain fatty acids, not enough DHA, EPA?
No. The weakness of the bone, you have less calcium absorption and less protein absorption with aging. And we want to maintain good muscle mass and good strength to maintain. That's why I'm trying to maintain good musculature and bone strength when we're younger. So if we're going to live that long, to be 100 years old, we have an adequate calcium reserve. And I'm also recommending, as calcium absorption goes down, especially in women who have smaller bones to begin with, over the age of 70, their ability to absorb calcium and even to absorb protein goes down. So the nutritarian diet is giving them a little extra, is making sure the diet has more calcium and protein than the typical plant-based diet.
Oh yeah, for sure.
More greens, because I'm also recommending some extra food-based calcium for as women get older. Not a large calcium supplement, but a small amount, just to add a little additional calcium to meals. We're trying to lower the possibility of them developing osteoporosis-related fracture in their later life, because they're going to live a long time. And we're also talking about frailty and making sure your diet is protein sufficient on the plant-based diet, and that we're not missing out on some benefits that people could have gotten from eating seafood or animal products.
Right.
The beneficial nutrients in seafood and animal products, besides enough protein, which is zinc, DHA, iodine, and vitamin D. But particularly zinc and DHA are linked to more resistance to infectious-related death, and DHA is protective not just against brain disease, but also against cancer and other causes of all-cause mortality, all causes of death.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so we're saying that low levels of DHA have been associated in scientific studies with increased early life death, so much so that lower levels of omega-3 index have the same risk factor as smoking cigarettes. Did you hear that?
That just seems so crazy to me. Wait, okay, because you just said a lot. Yeah. You said food-based calcium. So did you mean supplement-based calcium, or?
I'm saying not just calcium carbonate and take Tums, just high-dose calcium. I'm not recommending that. I'm saying a little bit of food-based calcium. That means our food-based calcium comes from green vegetables or seaweed. Okay. So we have like a small amount of calcium added to each meal. So it's like your meal has a little extra calcium for a frail woman growing in her later years as calcium bioavailability goes down, compared to taking a huge dose of calcium at one time, which floods the body with a spike of calcium that could cause cardiac calcifications or joint calcifications. So we're just giving a little extra calcium to keep the bioavailability and absorption adequate to support adequate bone structure. And we want the vitamin D to be adequate too.
Wait, so you're right. You're saying get some of it from food, but also supplement with some of it.
You're getting most of it from food.
Oh, most of it from food.
Yeah.
And so you just supplement with a little of it.
There's a little extra in the diet as a woman gets over the age of 70.
Because you said reserves, which I thought was an interesting concept too. Like I think of a reservoir where you're stocking away some of these vitamins and minerals so that it doesn't affect you poorly, so that you have enough to get you through your whole life. Like it's not just you can't just like supplement with it and then have immediate effects. Is that what you're saying?
That's true, what you just said. I mean, in other words, we weightlift, and that we, meaning men, women, we weightlift to keep the muscle and bone density high, because there is some decrease in bone density that occurs from the ages of 40 on, let's say. You don't just develop a fracture at the age of 70. You develop weakening of your bones for 20, 30, 40 years before you have that fracture or severe osteoporosis. So we're keeping good bone strength all through life. You don't just suddenly lose your bones later in life. So we're trying to do the right things all through life to prepare us properly to have the best quality later years of our life.
But you said the craziest thing about DHA ever, basically, because I always thought of DHA EPA because I take yours and it's like this beautiful liquid, and I always felt like it was a good protective barrier for my brain. And your brain's like all these synapses and stuff like that. Me and my crazy mind, I just feel like it's good protection. But you said it affects all cause of death.
All cause of death we're talking about.
And cancer.
Cancer death and heart attack and stroke death. We're saying low levels of the omega-3 index and lack of ability to make sufficient DHA affects your immune system and your entire body, not merely your brain. So that lower levels are associated with higher risk of all-cause mortality, which means cancer death, heart attack death. But basically...
In later life or like at any point? Because sometimes the vegan community is like, you could convert enough. You don't need to supplement with DHA EPA.
Right.
But you're saying we don't even get it. There's a little bit in green vegetables, but not a lot.
Well, the ALA you convert somewhat, and you convert enough to get by with a normal lifespan. A normal, people in primitive times lived to be 60 years old. They were, accidents, lifespan, they had whatever they had to cause them to die younger. But we have a unique opportunity in human history to live longer. So these vegans who are not supplementing with DHA are not walking around demented and with depression. They're producing enough DHA for adequate brain function through most of their life, just like they have adequate bone function for most of their life. But the question is that adequacy ideal to maximize human health when you're pushing the envelope of human longevity?
In those last 20 years.
In the last
30.
Last 15 years, last 10 years. Yes, when you get memory loss.
So these are pitfalls we can avoid so it doesn't all go to shit, all of our efforts to eat healthy.
Right. So the answer is you probably are, that most people are producing enough omega-3 and even long chain just for like an average shortened lifespan, because the average lifespan in the modern world is shortened. We're using science to give people the opportunity to maximize their lifespan. And if we can do that, we have to maximize the factors that maintain our excellent health in our later years.
But I think what we all have to be reminded of is that you're not saying just to take it in your later years because it's too late then.
It's too late then, right.
I have to take it now.
This is very confusing for people.
Hold on, I need to take some.
Yeah.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, so people will argue everything. They can argue anything. Oh, well, their arguments don't really make sense because they're saying, well, look, there's an adequate amount. You don't need that much because look, this population isn't sick and they're not taking much.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't understand that all those studies on populations that they're showing they don't have are irrelevant.
Is this why fish are so famous for being healthy?
No, fish are so famous for being healthy because the studies compare it to eating meat. And meat is so bad, it makes fish look good. Because fish is lower in saturated fat than other animal source foods are. And saturated fat causes insulin resistance, promotes atherosclerosis, raises cholesterol, and promotes cardiovascular death. And even cancer deaths related to saturated fat exposure. So fish give you the protein with high omega-3 fatty acids, and because meat has adequate zinc too. Us vegans are lower in zinc because we're not eating animal products. But nevertheless, so meat will give them zinc, as well as fish.
Oh, fish have zinc.
Fish and meat both have a good amount of zinc.
Okay.
That's absorbable to the body.
So fish has zinc.
But the fish has more omega-3 fatty acids protecting the brain, and the saturated fat, it's lower in fat in general, but the saturated fat is low, so it's not as cardiovascularly dangerous or cancer dangerous. So in all the studies showing all the health authorities saying, oh, fish is toxic and fish is poison, but you still eat your fish, because studies show it's linked to long lifespan. Well, it's not true. They're not comparing fish to eating beans and nuts. They're comparing fish to people who eat red meat, and people eat more fish eating less meat are living longer. But it still doesn't make fish good. It's the same way the people promoting eggs can say, well, you're promoting eggs to donuts, eggs look good. But we're not. But you promote eggs to compare eggs to beans and see what it causes. Let's take the best lifespan promoting foods and see if it's better to eat beans and nuts, or is it better to eat fish for that protein? Because beans and nuts and green vegetables are high in protein.
But okay, so beans and nuts have a ton of good stuff, like resistant starches, good fats, ALA, all this good stuff. But do they have zinc?
Well, the zinc in plant foods is bound by phytic acid, and it's not absorbed as readily. You'd lose almost half the absorption of zinc from plant foods.
Okay.
So one weakness of a plant-based diet is lower zinc exposure than diets that are more omnivorous.
Okay.
The omnivorous diets where you get more exposure to zinc.
Is this where supplementing smartly comes in?
Yes, and that's why, and also zinc absorption goes down with aging. And there are studies that show that people who take zinc in their later years have lower risk of infectious-related death and cancer-related deaths. So zinc supplementation is one of the, you could say, scientifically supported supplements to reduce risk of death in your later years.
So it is true what they say, like online and stuff like that. There are, even in a nutritarian diet, there is some gaps in vitamins and minerals. Because we don't eat meat, because we don't eat fish, like in ancient times.
Fish, you get vitamin D too. You get vitamin D from the sun as well.
Fish have vitamin D. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But like, I always like to think about it like this. In ancient times, caveman era, do you think humans were supposed to eat fish and meat and it got too polluted, or?
Well, they ate what they could find, but in most of our DNA, we're related to the great apes, chimps, baboons, gorillas, and our DNA is there's primate DNA. So we're plant-based eaters with a little bit of animal products, and people were opportunistic. They eat whatever they can find in their environment. When I was a little kid, I could easily catch frogs and tadpoles, and I could catch worms and snakes and rabbits, and I did. I caught rabbits.
Did you?
Yeah, I caught rabbits in the backyard. I used to put like a little cardboard box with a string with a little stick on it when I tie the carrot to a string next to the box, and the box would fall on the rabbit when he would pull the string. And I used to catch and sell. I would sell frogs and tadpoles to my classmates when I was a kid.
I knew that. I knew you really liked, you
and
actually.
I caught tadpoles. Yeah.
That's insane. Were you just a man with nature? Did your parents not feed you? What was with the rabbits?
I liked going, we lived close to like the wilderness. I just loved being in the wilderness and being in the woods.
Like any young boy up to no good.
My
Who
friends,
knows what they could get into?
We used to climb trees and make tree houses and climb under rocks and make
I still
caves.
climb trees. Do you know this?
Yeah.
Next time I'm going to call you up. Climb a tree with me.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, I love that. Caves. I didn't know about that.
And caves and climbing rock formations and making caves and, that was kind of
Sounds
fun.
like stuff we still do, though.
As a kid, you like to do that kind of stuff.
But even as an adult, I mean, we climb big rocks. They're just bigger. And
How
we
are
go in
getting
caves.
into this conversation? Getting back to our podcast.
Fish. Oh, yeah. Ancient man. I feel like.
But I'm saying it's easier to, that salamanders, I used to catch salamanders in the rocks, that eating these foods were natural because they're easy to catch. We're not going to run down an antelope or even a deer very easily, or certainly a bison or wild cattle, and you're not going to, we eat small animals. And these small animals, frogs, salamanders, snakes, fish, seafood, are high in omega-3 fatty acids. We get a good omega-3 DHA exposure.
So more animals than just fish have these omega-3s.
Yes, and primitive humans had more adequate omega-3 intake compared to the omega-3 in cattle today, in red meat, and compared to people eating vegan diets today, which nobody ate vegan diets years ago. So they
would have like a little bit, whatever they could get their hands on of meat. They would forage a lot, and then I picture
they weren't cat taking. We don't have the fangs and claws or speed to catch unless tools were developed and weapons were developed. But most of humans, primitive humans, weren't relying on that.
Yeah, they weren't. You always said like striking down huge bison and cows with their bare hands. It was more like fish. Yeah,
so animal product diets were not that available. Regardless of what primitive humans have done, we still have enough studies to support in a scientific matter that a diet richest in natural plant material promotes human longevity the most.
It's the best.
It gives us the opportunity to have lower rates of cancer, lower rates of heart attacks and strokes, and live a longer lifespan. But now we might as well make it as adequate as we possible, even those nutrients that are somewhat borderline in, that we might get from salamanders and frogs and fish and seafood.
We have the technology to deliver those in like a beautiful capsule or a dropper and stuff like that. You're saying,
especially with the advent of pollution and toxins in seafood, so the question is it better to eat a little seafood in your diet or little salamanders to get that omega-3 and zinc and iodine, and or is it better to just use a supplement to get those?
Right.
And I guess I'm arguing that my opinion and what I'm doing for myself is I think it's safer for us to get the extra nutrients through a supplement, not through this little bit of seaweed. Many argue that exclude the seafood, go strictly vegan, but you don't need the supplement either. And I'm saying, whoa, that's really a hypothesis that's going to put people at risk.
Yeah,
and I don't want to be a person with the responsibility of messing people up like that, because I have a unique experience in the you could say in the plant-based world. I've had taken care of the most long-term elderly vegans I think of any living physician as their primary care doctor. Being associated with the American Natural Hygiene Society, the American Vegan Society, all my friends and people who were early adopters of a vegan diet, who adopted a vegan diet in the 1950s, then became my patients. And I see these people deteriorate in their elderly years.
I know everyone, I feel like, reaches out to you when they have questions about supplements or like
and they get problems.
Their DHA is low.
There were not a lot of other doctors they could go to who were plant-based, plant-based sympathetic.
Right.
And when they came to me, I measured their blood and their problems and see the problems they developed. They had a lot of people developing dementia. And the leaders of the plant-based movement, most of them developed either dementia or Parkinson's disease. So that if it's dangerous for the pregnant women and the children,
I don't want it then.
Then it's showing us we shouldn't be exposed to this at any age,
Exactly. Then maybe don't.
Because we don't see it right away. It takes years and years to accumulate. And the cyanobacteria.
Cyanide bacteria? There's cyanide that are...
No, it's not cyanide. It's cyanobacteria.
Oh. Thanks for clearing that up. I'm like, does it get any worse?
You were assigned the main dish, so you made...
My famous zucchini lasagna, red sauce, layer the zucchini, and then you have a cashew tofu ricotta, which is so good.